Streaming is hard. Okay, so my name is Safi. This is going to be a playthrough of Call of Duty Modern Warfare for class. Specifically, it's for representation in games. My final project is to discuss the representation of Middle Eastern people in games. I'm going to be using this game as kind of a case study. I'm going to be streaming it, playing through it. Come here. My cat is biting cords. I'm going to be using this as like a case study. I'm going to be discussing the things that I see as I play the game, share my thoughts on it, and I'm also going to be quoting articles and whatnot that I've read regarding the topic, as well as the development of this game. The tone of the stream is going to be analytical and academic. This is my first time streaming, so there might be some hitches in the way. Hopefully we'll get through that. I've beaten this game before, I know what happens, but there will be spoilers ahead, so be warned with that. The game, I'm going to be discussing a lot of the points and the statements that this game makes, either intentionally or inadvertently, about Middle Eastern people and how it views the Middle East. Previous knowledge of other Call of Duties would be good, but I'm going to be referencing them as referencing things at times and trying to summarize them at best, if not. I think that's it. I'm going to be discussing the plot at times just to summarize some things, but we're going to start off with the mission Fog 4. It doesn't directly reference Middle Eastern representation all too much, other than this first and last scene.
Our war is not for our fate. We fight to remove all foreign power from our soil. We are Al-Qatala. We are the killers. We fight without sorrow. We wage war without sympathy. This is the only way to live and die a true soldier.
So that is Al-Qatala, their Al-Qaeda alternative in this game, stand-in. The two antagonists, the first one was introduced, the Wolf, very stylized terrorist. This is Alex, our first protagonist, a also very stylized white man. He's a CIA agent, he works for the American government.
Teams are locked and loaded for assault. You are green to go.
Colonel, we may have a problem.
Too late, Laswell. We're live.
Not until I say so. Watch it at 3-1, how copy?
Station Chief Laswell, send traffic.
General
This is the
Barkov
second
sent
antagonist,
some
Sergeant
shipment
Barkov.
to Depot, but his mercs are
His
prepping
introduction is very
defense
different than the Wolf's. The Wolf's was shown as this violent, aggressive extremist who would do anything possible to further his cause. In this case, that example, using a suicide bomber in Piccadilly Circus in London. We'll get back to that. Barkov's, however, was just a computer screen.
Just locate the gas, commandeer Barkov's truck and get off the exit before the tide turns.
Copy, Watcher. We'll handle it.
So, Alex starts off this mission. So this game, the tone that this game portrays is a very analytical kind of, not analytical, professional militaristic tone. You're part of this tier 1 group of operatives right now as a CIA agent. You have like deep weapons training. You're with a bunch of really professional operatives in this stealthy forest segment. The controls in this segment are actually different than the game usually plays. You move slower. Sprinting this is basically your normal walk speed. So the way you hold the handgun is slightly different as well. Oh, these are the first enemies. They're mercenaries, no uniforms, and for some reason, because they have no ideology, they're okay to kill.
Okay, drop them. We're clear. Copy. Post up on the ridge and let's get the lay of the land.
So, I mean, as of right now, they're mercs, but where are their corpses? Their models are a little more indiscriminate, but these are actually Russian soldiers. The way these guys are portrayed, they're portrayed as militaristic. They have equipment, they're in camouflage, they know what they're doing. We'll compare that to the Middle Eastern people later on in the game. So this is the chemical weapons facility. The goal here is to find the chemical weapons as Alex. Here, the game wanted to portray itself as this myth slow-paced, thinking man shooter, with a slow tone, somber and serious. Here, this is one of their attempts at it, just getting a scope on the land, doing reconnaissance on the area, and with a bunch of military lingo in there to make it seem like they're professional. Albeit this is the only time you really do something like this. The first thing you do is you have to hit the trigger to call in the airstrike that he just does. And the first action you can take in this game is really just dropping white phosphorus, which is a highly controversial, highly deadly burning substance onto this entire chemical weapons facility, killing everybody there. Well, most people. The first action you do is fundamentally what is a lot of people would consider, and I would consider, a war crime. So the tone of this game, the developers really wanted to portray it as this serious military shooter, something with very dire tones and circumstances. The guns are modeled impeccably. The soldiers are wearing realistic gear. Their lingo is, from what I know, accurate. This shovel never comes into play, but he still has it rendered on his model. The quality of this game and the amount of work put into it is incredibly huge, and it's because they wanted to show that off. They marketed it as this realistic, gritty shooter. If you check the marketing for this game, they have a big focus on breaching clear situations, other military situations that are incredibly serious and high stakes, taking a slower pace compared to what Call of Duty usually takes. However, as we move forward, you'll see the quicker pace come into play. I want to make a clear distinction between authenticity and realism. I don't think this game is really realistic. You can take multiple bullets. Situations like this aren't... They could happen. I could see a Western military force doing this. But let me put up the brightness, because it is a little difficult to see on my end. Cool. Hopefully... Oh, that is way too bright. Is that a little better? Nope. I'm sorry. I usually don't play on this TV. This is probably what it was before. The fact that you're running around at these incredibly high speeds, carrying copious amounts of weaponry, able to eat dozens of bullets before magically healing yourself, this game is not realistic. It's authentic. It features real-life tones, real-life weapons, real-life countries, and analogs for countries that exist in real life. And by portraying an authentic experience rather than a realistic experience, it's kind of showing what they believe is realism. It's their interpretation of realism. And as we move forward to the specifically representation of Middle Eastern people, it's played out differently. I guess they saw that flashlight. Usually they breach that door and fight them for me.
Element of surprise is not on our side, boys. Stay frosty.
It's their interpretation of real life. It's what they believe the real world is and how it should be. Even though the Middle Eastern people in this country are from a fictional nation, we will see that there are clearly real-life counterparts. This is the first soldier to go down, and it's not for his own fault. So, this is where the combat really kicks into gear. You can see you can change your fire rate. Full auto is all you really need. You don't need to do a single shot. Enemy should be coming up here. Played this mission a decent amount of times. Yeah, so marketing, while it did portray itself as this realistic shooter, as you can tell, the way I'm just murdering dozens of people, like, this is not realistic. This is inauthentic. This is just using a military aesthetic to get fun gameplay across. Moving forward through the level, there should be 2 people here. Oh. Sorry, I'm checking off my notes. So Rami Ismail in a podcast with Danny O'Dwyer that I'll be bringing up later, he talked about the idea of another, implicitly who you play as in games or who are the protagonists in movies, TV shows. They are the they're the good guys in almost every circumstance. They're the people you should be idolizing, the people you should be empathizing with, and the bad guys are implicitly in others. The bad guys are people who historically have always been, you know, have had actions that are deplorable, that aren't good. I literally just shot at fleeing soldiers, and the game did not penalize me at all. But in other situations, they do penalize me. Implicitly, just right off the bat, they portray Western governments, specifically the American government, as the good guys. These guys are assaulting this facility, risking their lives, going through incredibly dangerous situations for the greater good, to capture these chemical weapons. Graphical glitch. The thing is, it's simply because they are the protagonists. Who knows? They don't do any attempt or make any attempt for at least at this point for us to empathize with the Russian characters. Damn, I thought I'd get him. But they do try to make sure that we know that these American main characters are stylized and look cool. Like make that point pretty apparent. Is there anybody here? I literally was looking up here. Yeah, so just right off the bat, who you play as it shows the developer's intent for who you should be empathizing with. Now, at least, modern audiences acknowledge the fact that certain demographics, even antagonists, should be slightly relatable. They should have a motive that is relatable. They shouldn't be bad for the sake of being bad. This game doesn't really make that big of an attempt at that at all. And we'll see that moving forward. Alex's comments and his tone are of note here. He, in Laswell too, as well, show their distrust of military authorities, just authority in general. They wish they had more autonomy, and they wish they could do things to their own accord. They wish they had less accountability, basically. That premise will be shown again in the next level, where the whole premise idea of getting your hands dirty for the greater good is going to be shown even more apparently. So after finding the chemical weapons, they are ambushed, and as we'll see soon, the people that ambush them and use these guerrilla tactics are Middle Eastern people. They're Al-Qatala, and they capture the chemical weapons. They will be speaking Arabic. Their gear will be slightly more Eastern in flavor. They will be less professional, using more guerrilla tactics, obviously. The distinction between them, the Russians, and the Americans are very clear at this point. You see that man he's wearing body armor and a gas mask, but just civilian clothing. Same with his friend in the back. They're using worn down rifles. There is a clear distinction between them and the Western soldiers. They are perpetrating the Middle Eastern terrorist stereotype, as, I mean, obvious. But, yeah, we'll see more of them later on. This is the end of the first mission. Alex is the only surviving operative, kind of showing his eliteness. He's the one who made it through and survived the attack. And because of this, it pushes him to hate these extremists even more. They killed his entire squad. And obviously they take the game's MacGuffin, the gas that you'll be looking for a majority of it.
This operation is now compartmentalized.
What the hell does that mean?
Means you no longer have clearance, Colonel.
Those are my Marines. We need a QRF in there right now.
That's not advisable.
And that is not your call.
Colonel Laswell,
General, my men...
Norris, give us a minute.
Yes, ma'am.
We've got a situation. The Kremlin has suspended all deconfliction channels. The Sixth Fleet is pushing into the Black Sea, and chemical weapons are now in the wild. Your fingerprints are all over this, Laswell. Fix it.
General, right now intelligence is our best weapon.
We've tried intelligence.
So,
Get me a better
moving
weapon.
forward, we see here the introduction of our first, the first women in the game. Actually, this is one of the first Call of Duties to have women as a focal, as being main characters, which is is not good. However, it is an example of cause marketing that's being used to hide the more problematic portions of this game. This is our introduction to Captain Price, another protagonist, another white man with cool facial hair and marketable looks. He's supposed to be the most elite of the elite, the man who's willing to do anything to get what needs to be done. And he, at several moments, goes and comes in and saves. Protagonist of color. This is our introduction to our next protagonist, Kyle Garrick. Gaz. He's a returning character from Call of Duty 4, the game this is a remix of. So is a remake. So is Captain Price. But
Yeah, Crystal.
Gaz's tone is immediately, Kyle's tone is immediately negative towards his authority figures. He's a cop who's tracking down these Alcatala operatives that you saw in the first cutscene that will bomb London. It's of note that this takes place in London, a real life, real occurrence. We clearly see chemical weapons or gasoline in there, like some sort of bomb. Kyle gets out with his other cops and tries to stop this. Kyle is frustrated that this doesn't go through the way it should be going through. He wishes he had more autonomy, he wishes he had more power, and he wishes he had more strength in this situation. Car ends up blowing up. Just the fact that, you know, the police weren't able to stop that attack shows that, you know, the developers are saying Kyle was right. He should have stopped them. He should have had the autonomy to. We're going to acknowledge the fact that Kyle is a person of color. He's black. The police's relationship with communities of color, specifically the black community, is, you know, obvious. Infinity Ward, the choice to cast a black man as this character was a conscious choice. They knew the backlash they would get if they casted a white person as a cop who had the ability to shoot civilians in this stage, civilians of color. I'll show that later. So if I look at my teammate, I can't actually shoot him. They let you shoot. Oh my god, he died. Holy shit, that is not supposed to happen. So when it comes to shooting your teammates, you get to shoot them once, and then after that, the trigger stops working. It works occasionally, but it's not effective. They shrug off the bullets almost always, other than that guy. But if the same does not work for civilians, if you shoot a civilian once, they instantly die and you get a mission fail state. The game is framing civilians in this game as more so a gameplay obstacle. It's a test of your perception to be able to dictate who is an antagonist and who is just a civilian. However, as we'll see, some civilians... let me see if I can find this character model. Some civilians are visibly Muslim. I know there is a woman who wears a hijab somewhere in this scene. She might pop up later. They reuse models a couple times. Kyle is able to use assault weaponry even though he's just a regular cop. Yeah, the game frames civilians as a gameplay obstacle instead of a moral good you're supposed to protect. Oh my god! First death, we'll ignore that. Instead of people that you're supposed to protect morally as they are, you know, it's his job, he's a cop. Civilians are instead framed as gameplay obstacles, you know, a test of your perception. I can't even tell, like, that is the model of the Muslim woman that they reuse several times. Civilians in this game are not people you're supposed to protect, they're people you're supposed to not kill. So let me find a better lighting for this. So you can see the Western civilians are modeled mostly white men, mostly white people, and then the antagonists, the terrorists, are masked, visibly Middle Eastern, wearing civilian clothing to attempt to blend in. This is a better look. It's clearly a Middle Eastern man, younger. He's in civilian clothing. The only thing that shows him apart is his tactical vest. The vast majority of all the enemies will be visibly Middle Eastern. When we play the multiplayer, we'll also look at some character models for other characters that are visibly Middle Eastern. The way they hold these weapons, they're not holding them properly that a trained officer or soldier would do. They're holding it by the hip, unprofessionally. I was able to kill that man before he even pointed a gun at me. I'm a cop. Police shouldn't be able to do that. I think this is a good example of a model. He has like a cloak on. He has what seems, yeah, he has facial hair. He's visibly a Middle Eastern man. The visual distinctions between the Middle Eastern characters and the Russian characters are clear. Even the way they are animated and move is different. Those Russian soldiers were trained. They had the funding for training, while these Middle Eastern soldiers are more, how do I say it? Ragtag. That was a suicide bomber. The game frames suicide bombings as a gameplay challenge, which is its own thing. Kyle is trained in using, no, my cat unmuted my stream. Too many USB. Okay, weird. The fact that he uses a suicide bombing as a gameplay challenge is concerning, to say the least. There should be a guy running out of here. Yep. So this is Piccadilly Circus in London. It is a real place. They went to incredible lengths to detail this as realistic as possible. Obviously, these aren't real brands. However, the advertisements and the architecture should be familiar to the area and recognizable. The game waits for you at any point, though. Java, no. That's my cat. He's biting the cords. You can hear yelling. You can hear police chatter. This is a realistic place. This is actually a photo of a real person. So moving forward, Kyle goes through this debris to try to save people, and he gets attacked by an insurgent, visibly Middle Eastern, and he gets saved. And there is no Java, no.
Captain Price. Sergeant Garrick. You with me?
Oh. This is my cat, Java. He was biting the cords. He's my son. Mwah! I love you. Go. Let me set my camera back up, because he knocked it over. Okay, cool. So Garrick was just saved by Captain Price. Captain Price, at different moments of the game, will save protagonists of color. He saves Garrick here. I think he does again later on. He will save Farah, who we haven't met yet. He's incredibly aware. He knows the situation, and he moves up to these hostages. Captain Price, like I said earlier, is willing to get things done, do what needs to be done, and throw away his own morality for the greater good. So this man is covered in a suicide vest that it's assumed that Al-Qatala put on him, because obviously Middle Eastern people love suicide bombings. That's sarcastic. I'm Middle Eastern. So Price, in this situation, takes the hard decision to decide to kill this man instead of try to save him, because, you know, there's no option. He has to save himself as well as the people around him. This is the first instance where this game is like, real lives are at stake. The stakes are high. The tone is dark and gritty. And Kyle Garrick, he seems like he wants that. He's a cop that wants that autonomy and that serious tone. No, Java, don't bite my headphones. This is Kyle, however, will have some apprehensions about this moving forward throughout the game.
Save lives today, Sergeant.
This shouldn't have happened in the first place, sir. They sent us in half-assed, so everyone could just keep pretending we're not at war.
Yeah, like the fucking century, that is.
Garrick
Why have
and
we got our
Price's
hands
disdain
tied?
for military authority is shown
Just
here.
take
They
the
want their
bloody
own.
gloves off and fight.
Take the gloves off and fight. He wants to be able to do the actions he needs to do without accountability. This game is parroting that idea a lot, that military should have more autonomy. They're saying that even if they're not taking a firm perspective on it.
They can tell us where, they can tell us when. Don't tell us how. My memory tracking that cell for weeks.
You were that
I'm gonna take my cat out.
Quite a bit, sir.
Okay, Garrett. You're with me.
Alcatala's claiming responsibility.
On orders from the Wolf and Urzikstan.
Alex is on the ground there looking for the stolen chems.
Well, he'll need the Liberation Force on his side, so have him contact the CR.
You know Commander Karim?
We're acquainted. Use my name, or don't kill him.
What is your message from Captain Price?
Commander Karim.
This is supposed to be a surprise. That
I'm
Farah
listening.
Karim is supposed to be a woman in the Middle East.
Hello, Adam. Jazuli halkom.
48 hours ago, terrorists stole a shipment of Russian gas.
Only Alcatala would do this.
The Russians make no distinction between Alcatala and your people.
And I make no distinction between Alcatala and the Russian army. They're both terrorists. We would never use these poisons.
Then help us track it before they...
Before they what? Take it to Europe? Or America?
She shows her distrust of the West right here.
Commander, it's time to go.
Hadir is her brother.
Alex, this is my brother and Lieutenant Hadir.
You are CIA?
He works with Captain Price.
She has a
Think
history
the
with Captain
Russians,
Price.
I have friends who can help us. But your sister decides what's next.
Of course. My sister is in command. And the Russian army is still here.
This occupation must end. That we can all agree on, yes?
No.
General Barkov's men control the city. We have plans to change that.
We have no missiles, but we have our ways.
If you stay, we can help you. But if you stay, you fight.
Yalanatu.
Marhaba Ali Urzikstan, Alex.
Follow me.
So you heard that music. You saw the aesthetics. The fact that Ferris Freedom Fighters use its underground tunnels to fight. The fact that they use AK-47s. The fact that you hear Middle Eastern Arabic chanting in the background.
We must hold nothing back.
This is Arabistan. In that podcast that I mentioned earlier with Rami Ismail, Danny O'Dwyer, Dunes of Arabistan on the No Kill podcast. Bomb. Middle Eastern man gives you bomb. Hit X for bomb. Square actually. So climb up this ladder. Rami Ismail, let me take out my notes. Discussed heavily the way the Middle East is portrayed in games, and how specifically in terms of antagonists, the Middle East is shown as this dusty, dirty place, underdeveloped, stone houses that is run down, paint chipping in the walls, construction equipment everywhere, dirt on the ground, head scarves and civilian Persian rugs. I'd be surprised if there isn't a hookah in this room. She puts on a headscarf because that is technically, apparently, a disguise that is good enough to be in the Middle East. I think that's part of a hookah. I can't really tell. That there's literally a hookah right here. This is a thing. Games love putting hookahs to show off the Middle East. You can conceal their weapon. You know, Alex is still visibly very white. Apparently, that's enough to hide him in the public. So the Middle East is always portrayed as this dusty, dirty place. If there is any sort of development, it's this with very visibly Middle Eastern culture and domes. The place is dirty and run down, tapestries hanging, sand and dust and dirt and grime everywhere. There's bullet casings all over the floor. The Middle East is painted as this incredibly run-down place. And this isn't to portray how it actually is. Sure, there may be places in the Middle East that look like this because of Western colonialism, but the Middle East actually is a developed place. The developers, Rami Ismail discussed how developers in just Western media, sorry, uh, like this area is still conservatively Muslim, even though it's the Russians. Separating the men and the women, that is still just an example of like stereotypical conservative Muslim cultures. Yep. This is the game's attempt at a puzzle. Grab cinder block. Let me keep talking. The reason why is because he discussed that the cultural antagonists have shifted. After World War II, it was the Nazis. For a little bit, for a while, it was the Russians, the Eastern Europeans, and the Communists. And now it's the Middle Eastern. Starting in the 90s, Middle Eastern people were portrayed as these radical extremists. And then after 2001, a more spiteful tone with that same representation was shown. As Middle Eastern people as antagonistic extremists. See, the Russian people are seen as the overbearing antagonists in this scene. However, the fact that they're portraying the Middle East as just run down, easy to control, place to be colonized, is still describing something. The fact that this place is all worn down and bombed out from war and conflict is describing something. A lot of these models and buildings are used in the multiplayer as well, which we'll discuss later. Let's move forward a little bit in the stage. This is their attempt at a puzzle. You grab a cinder block to look like a male worker, and you work. You walk by the Russian with the gun. So we see Barkov here. In Call of Duty 4, you would see Al-Assad, that game's one of that game's primary protagonists, a Middle Eastern man, do his propaganda speeches on TVs. Here it's Barkov. So Farah is easily shown to be killing these people. See the animation cut through that. See, you're shown as a Western savior, saving this Middle Eastern woman. Because Farah couldn't save her, obviously. Barkov is shown as this cartoonishly villainous man. Law and Order for All, these propaganda posters. It's almost comical. It's funny how they portray him at times. However, the atrocities they're showing here, dead bodies just hidden in a back alley, Muslim men and women just dead. And they are visibly Muslim. She's wearing a headscarf. This is obviously a religious thing. Interesting how the Russians are putting signs up in English in a Middle Eastern country. God, I hate this. Yeah, I mean, just the visuals of this. There's dust everywhere. There's that brown, hazy filter that Western media decides to put on anything that isn't America or like Europe. You see run-down Middle Eastern people here and there. It's incredibly disgusting. See, the fact that Farah is telling you to find an oil filter. I think there's one in here. Yeah. Farah's insurgency is seen as this ragtag group of soldiers who aren't. Magically, he's able to just put an oil filter on a gun. That makes no sense. And you can't even aim down the sights. Cool. So implicitly playing as a white man in the stage, not playing as Farah, not playing as a soldier of color, has its own implications. Can I put a silencer on this? Yeah, I can. Cool. Um, by playing as a white man, it's implicitly saying that the person you are uh, is the good guys.
Take two. I'll take the other.
Let me use the other gun for this.
Now, Alex.
Clear.
This way.
Like I said earlier, who you play as is the good. They're the people you're supposed to be. I'll take the deagle. Somehow you're able to hide a whole submachine gun in your pocket. So who you play as is implicitly the good guys. They're you fighting against terror, implicitly implying that Barkov thinks that Middle Eastern people are terror. People literally hanging from a crane.
I know what you mean. You understand why we do this? They hanged because they killed our soldiers. Now look at them.
Let's get moving.
Farah in this case is still another to Alex. Even though he is with her, he doesn't know her. He doesn't.
What can we do?
He says we. He still tries to make this point that they're together, though. I mean, it's clear he's an American soldier. They're two different people. This is part from a multiplayer map, which is kind of strange, tonally incredibly different. More hookah, more Arabic. I can't read Arabic, and I don't even know if this Arabic is correct, but I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't. Is this a hookah bar?
Barkov is sending in helicopters. We take them out. Forces from the base will come running.
She's up here. Farah in this case is in a strange place. She's not implicitly in us, but she's not implicitly in other at the same time. She's in the strange middle ground, and the game kind of treats her like that the entire time. They know the game assumes that we cannot empathize with her, that she is not part of the protagonist group and who they portray. So because of this, she is in this strange middle ground, and as we see further, the way they represent her is incredibly messed up. Rami Ismail in that same podcast, he just I'm gonna walk slowly so I can discuss. He talked about how the West, they're the tastemakers. In other games, movies, TV shows, a lot of the media that they consume in the Middle East is from the West. It may be dubbed, it may still be in English, and obviously they still make Middle Eastern media. However, a lot of times it is the West dictating this. And he said that growing up seeing Western people portray the Middle East in this light as this dirty, disrupted place that are the bad guys, almost always, made him internalize that. Portrayals like this it's dangerous. Having developers kind of show the Middle East as this decrepit Western place. Is that a beer? That looks like a beer. I'm not saying I'm surprised. I mean, alcohol exists in Middle Eastern countries. I'm just they don't know whether to show this place as a disrepid, conservative place or a nice Western, playground. Alcohol is cool. You can, I mean, if you're reading Barkov's subtitles in the corner, they're absolutely hilarious. That man is a joke. So we break into this area carrying our cinder block because they're like, oh yeah, white man with cinder block, cool. He fits in. We're walking through Arabistan, using guerrilla tactics, country littered in trash and dust and decay. The amount of effort they had to put into this single area that you're not even going to look at this deeply. Granted, this area is reused as a multiplayer map, so that might be why, but the fact that they put so much detail into portraying the Middle East as this dirty, decrepit place is infuriating. It literally bothers me. Moving back, Rami would talk about how Western media dictates a lot of this stuff, but the things that they would depict would be things like, guards
on the entry. Two down.
Middle Eastern people are bad. It would basically say that, like, killing Middle content, specifically sexual content, isn't. There's usually 3 guys up here. Maybe it was just on the harder difficulty. So you plant the explosives on this Russian chopper. Moving forward. You need to plant the explosives over there as well. The game blurred. Obviously you're supposed to be silent in this section, but... Oh, no! These are the people that were supposed to spawn on the roof. They spawned late. He would... Rami mentioned that content such as... violent content, you know, the murder of Middle Eastern people is okay. However, sexual content, things of that nature, isn't. Are these blocks of tobacco? I'm confused. I haven't smoked hookah in a minute, so like I don't really know. Could be. Soap shop. I wonder if that's accurate. Why are they putting these signs up in English? like they just need it to say, oh, it's so, they need it to say it in English for it to be understandable for their audience. Content that is sexual isn't okay, though content like this is. This is the only time in the game they use these features of like attaching sights and attaching suppressors. Where am I going? Oh, this roof. There should be a way up this way. Cinder block. Way to go anywhere. It's just interesting how the dichotomy of portraying the Middle East as an incredibly conservative place, though filling it up with this so much violence and destruction is okay. But the moment any sort of sexual content is portrayed, it's bad, it's negative. Which is kind of similar to the Western view. Violence is okay, but sexual content isn't. Did I kill him? Yep. You can shoot through walls in this. Yikes. Yeah, I'm gonna try to stealth this portion. Sexual content is not okay, but content like let me carry this block. See, it makes it okay. It makes it incredible. Yeah. It's just interesting how the beliefs that Western countries kind of put onto Middle Eastern countries also exist in the Western countries themselves. Take those guys out. This isn't to say that this representation of the Middle East isn't to say that developers only show the Middle East like this. I mean, the Russian soldiers in this area are cartoonishly depicted. Not saying the Russian government's cool too. They have some shitty things. They invaded Afghanistan a while ago, but it's cartoonishly showing them as these horrific villains, these like Bond movie villains, really, overt fascists when they may not like actually be like that. Other cultures are depicted in similar ignorant ways. It's just that in the Middle East, it's such a large region. It's so diverse. You have countries, Rami specifically said, like Lebanon, which is a very Western, very developed country, which is right next to Saudi Arabia, which is more Muslim, it's more Eastern, it's more conservative, but culturally they're just two different places. And when media decides to depict the Middle East, they use what he said was broader strokes. The brush is still there, but instead of saying this part of the Middle East is like this country's like that, this place is like that, almost always they go for this rudimentary, basic, Western approved vision of it, because this is what's most approvable by Western audiences. This is most visibly Middle Eastern, at least to a Western eye. by generalizing the Middle East like this. While other games like Overwatch show the Middle East as, you know, a place of cultural significance with like places like Egypt. This is like almost I went up the same building. Why were there guards here? I'm confused. It paints like Western countries are also painted like this ignorantly and specifically like I mean other countries. Oh God, I don't want to put down the dog. Other countries are also painted like this. It's just Middle Eastern countries are more. Oh, who is shooting? I have the situational awareness of a boulder. The Middle East more often than other countries is portrayed in this way. That was fair said it. I wasn't really paying attention. That's it. That's it. Cool. Plant these explosives. Other games get the representation right, although this game does not. The thing is, the fact that this is a remake gave them the opportunity to kind of clean up their portrayal of Middle Eastern people, and they didn't really make an attempt. Oh God, that dog. They instead decided to portray the Middle East in the same way, just at a higher fidelity. Before, the Middle East was controlled by an oppressive regime, albeit a Middle Eastern regime, that had a coup. They're a Middle Eastern country. I don't even know if it was a real country or not. I don't remember. But this country, even though it's fake, it's basically the same thing. It's just with more polygons. Look at those polygons. Look at that. It's a rag on the floor, and they still decided to use it to be racist. Oh, let's move forward. So Farah's presence as another protagonist isn't actually entirely surprising for the game. There have been Middle Eastern protagonists before in Call of Duty, or assistants to protagonists, people who help out the protagonists. It's not a first. Let me detonate. However, in other games, specifically Advanced Warfare, they had, you know, Egyptian soldiers fighting alongside you, but take the left, okay. I wonder if that injured any civilians. Oh shit. Okay, that game also featured, you know, Egyptian soldiers helping you, albeit they betrayed you immediately because apparently Middle Eastern people aren't to be trusted. It's so funny because the way the Russians speak about the people from Kazakhstan really does reflect the way Western developers just see Middle Eastern people in general. It's kind of funny, actually. I don't know why I'm just making this conclusion now. Yeah. So I'm going to continue playing this level. I've gone through my notes. I'll keep on bringing things up as we play, but it's going to be more so of a let's play at this point for the rest of the stage. Where am I going? Fair? This set piece is incredibly linear. This is a callback to Call of Duty 4. They had a segment where you're trying to sneak past guards, Russian guards actually, and you hide under a truck in order to do that while they run past you. Albeit you were in like these ghillie suits, blending into the grass, and it was this whole thing. This game has a lot of callbacks to the Call of Duty 2007. It's strange that a lot of its appeal to a lot of people was just nostalgia. The fact that it had Captain Price, had Gaz, it had just the same name, same settings. They've been banging that in on the multiplayer as well by featuring guns that appeared in the original game, by featuring places and levels, by remaking levels that appeared in the original game. Holy shit. This is an example of a big bombastic set piece. They thought this game would have a more somber tone. It doesn't. Where am I going? Sometimes it gets so visually busy that I have a hard time kind of running through it. This is another callback to that mission. That mission involved you going prone in areas that you would blend in, and Shia Rout calls it a war crime when Alex literally committed one earlier. Oh god, I really had to mess that up. They had you at several times just go prone in the grass as enemies walked by. in this case, the camouflage is not you wearing a grass suit. It's you looking Middle Eastern to blend in with dead Middle Eastern people. It's even funnier because it's Alex. Alex in this form is wearing a type of camouflage. He's dressed up as a Middle Eastern man wearing like some sort of head dressing or scarf or mask. Coronavirus joke. Farah isn't. Farah just blends in. She doesn't have camouflage. She's just Middle Eastern. It is also interesting to note that Farah is visibly from this country. She does not wear a head wrapping for most of the game. Not that she has to or that she should. It is just interesting that she is she doesn't wear a hijab. She doesn't wear a headscarf other than now as a disguise. It makes perfect sense for her not to be Muslim. That's fine, especially like if she drops her faith, that could be a form of characterization. However, the fact that Farah is shown as this incredibly capable woman in this country that is fighting for their lives, there's this Western narrative that Middle Eastern women who throw away their headscarf, that stop wearing it, are liberate, that they're finally free of the chains that Islam could have had on them. That's not true. A headscarf is a form of self-expression for a lot of women. It's their form of expressing their own modesty that Islam wants of them. And by having Farah not wear it, while it has that kind of implicit effect, it has the effect that like they are saying that she is, by agreeing with Western military officials and working with them, and by like taking off her headscarf, she's finally liberated and free. I don't agree with that, but it seems like that's what the developers are trying to say. Is that the end of the level? Yeah. So that level you basically got on her good side.
On the edge of Barkov's base. Keep those fucking dogs in check. Friends close, enemies closer. I told you we have our ways. No grenades, so we improvise.
Not bad.
We fight this war with sticks and stones.
Let's examine this place. Let's look around. Bottles of alcohol. Surprising. They're trying to show this place as a conservative Middle Eastern place. Why do they have alcohol? They have like those kind of basic rockets. Now you'll notice that the Middle Eastern characters have names. So the Call of Duty gameplay-wise, historically, has always give you something more visually interesting to look at. Has always, when you look at a teammate, the game randomly generates, or it was randomly generated previously, names for all of these soldiers. Sergeant Johnson, Captain Smith, stuff like that. I think Captain Price was the name. That name was an effect of that, because Captain Price technically, this is the second time he's been remade. The one in Call of Duty 4 is a remake of a Captain Price in Call of Duty 2. The deep lore. Now you're going to be noticing that the characters here also have names. When you look at them, they have highlighted names. This is like Omar. This is like Ahmad. Like things like that. It's interesting to note that none of these people have the byline of sergeant or captain or anything along those lines. It's just their names. I mean, Hadir is just Hadir. Lena is just Lena. But, these people, they just their first name. Farah they even call her commander, though they only call her Farah here. They knock her down from a position of authority in order to make her a little more empathetic, or they assume it'd make her more empathetic. Obviously, you can't empathize with a woman in control. I hate these people. Inverted controls. Yeah, so here they put you in control of an RC plane. Improvised warfare. Somehow, though, if you're controlling an RC plane, this is basically a drone that you use to bomb things. Before they had these rudimentary missiles, but now they have these RC planes with HD cameras on them and explosives strapped to them. Obviously, yeah, this is still very bare bones, but it's just It's just funny that they gamified and made an interesting mechanic out of improvised warfare, which is something that, you know, is not something that it's dirty. Like, these people are fighting to save their lives like this because they have to. They don't have the money for the weapons. It's also interesting that Alex doesn't give him any sort of Western support other than him being there. He could easily just call in like an airstrike and save this. I'm sure there's some military mumbo jumbo stopping him from doing that, some plot relevance. It's just he's refusing to share his resources to help them liberate themselves. I think he will eventually. That's part of his characterization, is that he called in a helicopter to help them. Why are they just shooting the ground? So I got shot from a place I don't even know. The game uses the player getting damaged to show like just the stress and the anxiety of the situation that all these people are going through. It's really interesting seeing these like Western writings of these names. Like I'm Afghan. My name is Safi Allah, I believe. And just seeing the different ways Middle Eastern names have been spelled in English is so interesting to me. So, I have to sneeze. Yeah, baby. Moving forward. It's just really interesting to see the spelling of these names. So this is a big raid on a Russian base. This whole set piece. You're using improvised weapons and explosives. You're scavenging weaponry off the floor. You're fighting a very dirty fight. And the RC planes are a quintessential kind of point needles. It's showing how scrappy the freedom fighters are when fighting the Russians, as opposed to say Al-Qatala, who take the easy way out. They use means that you know, aren't respected in warfare, and we'll see how this works later on. It's interesting how Alex is in control of these, what I would say are very advanced military weapons, but the other soldiers aren't. Obviously, just because you play as Alex instead. This would have been a great section to have a Middle Eastern playable character instead of waiting for Farah later on. AK-12. It's not a gun that's usually in multiplayer. This is the first Call of Duty game with doors you can open. Surprising. Where are they at? I don't even know where I'm going. So this is a big set piece for an Beta Russian base, and it's interesting because this set piece features the two modern American bad guys, Middle Eastern people as the protagonists, and the Russians. And it's interesting because this base visually and aesthetically is comparable to a lot of Western, just American bases in places like Afghanistan and Iran. Actually, I don't think there are any American bases in Iran. Well, anyways, like visually, this is it looks Western. Like they have, you know, like these pop-up bases, sandbags everywhere. It's supposed to be this developed kind of place compared to, you know, obviously if this was an Urzikstan base, it would look different. And it's really interesting that they make Russians, the other cartoony bad guys, carry very similar visual aesthetics to Americans. While these our outfits are more Russian than American, obviously, just the base itself looks American, and I think there's an interesting dynamic there because both American bad guys are here, and you're fighting with one of them, and the fact that the Russians who kind of parrot American aesthetics in this case are being attacked and blindsided by the Urzikstan who aesthetically reflect more of an American view on terrorists and Middle Eastern freedom fighters than, you know, an organized military. When the Middle East still has organized militaries, I understand Urzikstan has already been taken over by the Russians, but like, I've seen like visuals of the Afghan military. I'm Afghan if it's not apparent because I keep bringing that up. keep seeing visuals of the Afghan military, and they look American. They have modern gear, they have modern camouflage. The only difference is that sometimes they use AK-47s, which I mean is a valid stereotype, I guess, because it's a cheaper weapon, and they don't have the money, the same money that the American military does, because the American military has a fucking outrageous budget. Because obviously Middle Eastern militia doesn't have the resources to fight the battles they need. They need Western help. They need Western intervention. That was an accident. The game literally just let me gun down a Middle Eastern woman with no regard for a mission fail state or anything along those lines. Like, it was completely fine. That was an accident. I understand they cannot have the clearest visual language because they need to have a certain level of visual fidelity and realism that at least they're striving for. But like, come on, dude. You can't shoot the light out. It's so static. The way these guys die is so cartoonish. He fell shooting his gun. Looks like an animation from Max Payne. Great game. I miss Max Payne. We'll ignore the fact that you play as a cop in that.
First armory's clear.
Good work. Regroup outside. Tarmac is through the gate. Everyone to the gate.
So the armory, it's easily framed as a place for you to restock and actually get, you know, substantial weaponry. I'll take that. Does it have... No, I don't want that. Was anyone ever in the chat? No. Cool. Yeah, it's clear that this is a place for you to regroup because, like, you weren't able to before the mission. It's kind of showing that Ferris forces need to take the weaponry of the Russians in order to fight back. You know, and it's going back to the analogy I made that the Russians here are kind of a stand-in for the Americans. It's showing that the Middle Eastern forces, like Western developers, think that they would have to steal from the West or take from the West in order to be effective. That thought spiraling on. Look, they have to do means like this and just using like trucks and vehicles to get there. When like, I'm sure Tier 1 Western operative force would have like a blowtorch to burn through that. They immediately have a helicopter gun these people down and kill them. You know. I know it's in the interest of making this cool looking set piece, but like, just the imagery of a Western force gunning down Middle Eastern people when like a high-tech helicopter rubs me the wrong way entirely. Yeah, I understand you're playing as a Western person in this, helping them. I feel like, again, like having Kyle be a black man or having Farah be a woman, it's just a way of having them save their own asses, saying like, oh, well, I mean, we're not painting a white versus brown aesthetic here because you're playing as a white guy. Or it's saying, like, we're not, like, having you play as a bad cop, you're one of the good cops. Like, I hate that kind of parroting of that aesthetic. That helicopter's obnoxious. We'll move forward. The game itself, though, is fun. Like, I gotta give it to it. Like, it's well-made mechanically. Like, it feels satisfying. I know Infinity Ward, they did some talent poaching off YouTube. In order to give the game, like, an authentic but not realistic feel, they had animators who worked on, like, YouTube animations. God damn. They had animators that worked on YouTube weapon animations, you know, stuff that looked cool or satisfying and, like, would go viral a little more easily. They hired animators that did stuff like that. Their animations weren't necessarily realistic. They wouldn't reload the guns or like shoot the guns in ways like professional military operatives would, but they did it in ways that looked visually and aesthetically appealing. Am I supposed to shoot that helicopter? It's been like months since I played this game. Like, yeah. Like, mechanically it's made well. It looks good. It's satisfying. They post that talent, and I mean, it kind of goes back to the point I made about the aesthetics being authentic and not realistic. Obviously, the uses of the... Oh my god, it let me do it again. I hate this game. they had these kind of more satisfying visual aesthetics, but they don't have realistic visual aesthetics. But that's okay because they're not trying to make a realistic game. Well, they said they were, but like actually they aren't. Well, that's what I'm arguing here. I remember this segment gave me a lot of trouble the first time I played it. There is less enemies here on a lower difficulty. Oh, I got a trophy. Cool. I just want to mention that the gun he's using that he got in Ferris soldiers' cases, like weapon cases, this is a Kar 98K. The Nazis used this in World War II. And yes, it's a gun that has been like mass marketed and produced since then, as I think like a hunting weapon, and also just like a cheap gun to use, like similar in vein to the AK-47, which is why you see that in the hands of a lot of like poor armies or militias. It's just the fact that Ferris like forces are using a gun like this. Like they couldn't have given them a decent weapon. Like I'm so confused. See, like dude has a version of it with attachments. Like come on. Moving forward. Yeah, this set piece is a lot more boring when it's on an easy difficulty. It's just kind of stop and pop. Visually, it's really impressive though. These airfields, these models, I don't recognize them being in the multiplayer, but they're in the Warzone, the Battle Royale mechanic. This game, like, I assume it's because all of the assets were so expensive to make, but there is a lot of asset reuse. Like in Piccadilly Square, like I recognize several models that I saw like repeatedly. And on other playthroughs that I saw two of the same model in the same area. Like they reuse assets like crazy, which is fine, but it is kind of telling that they're like, so say for the mission we just did prior to this, where we're in the Middle Eastern town, it's really interesting to see that like that place was almost verbatim a multiplayer map and it was reused like that, but they would give the time and care to a Western base to make the Western base unique from anything else in the game. Why couldn't the Middle Eastern town be made from scratch for the campaign? Like I know why. The deer has a nice beard. Gotta give him that. I'm in Ramadan beard mode. I don't know why so many games have the set piece. You push someone up a wall and they help you up. Is it a loading screen? Because if it's a loading screen, nothing deloaded. What is really interesting, I haven't died enough in this game to actually see that quote. They mix in quotes from the game's fictional antagonists alongside real life quotes about war and the horrors of war and the costs and the terror of it all. Like they really put them alongside each other, kind of saying they're analogous to each other. This grenade launcher, this is the only time in the entire game that you use it. The only time. Which is so strange to me. Like they went to the model of trouble of modeling it and including it in the game, and it's only here. So then the moment you come out, it gets dark, and then it's a last stand kind of deal. You're sitting out with Ferris forces. I expected there to be peace at this point. Sorry about that. I forgot I turned off the music. Yep, and there's a tank there. And like as much as you shoot it, it does nothing.
Echo 3-1, Viper 1-1 on approach, ready for tasking. What's your position?
So here is when Alex finally decides to call in his support. Apparently they just weren't available for him. But like Alex couldn't have been like, yo, chill for 30 minutes before we get you guys a high-tech military helicopter to fight. These are American soldiers fighting Russian forces, by the way. The implications of using Russians. I need to talk about that in another VOD or video. But yeah, Alex basically saves the day. He saves Farah's forces in this fight, implicitly saving Farah, kind of making her realize how great of an asset he is, and kind of putting her in debt to him, which is just messed up. The fact that the developers willingly put Farah's forces in a situation like this to make her owe Alex something, and owe Alex her cooperation, is just dirty. I don't like that. Like, she can't have agency. She can't save her own forces from this. Again and again, the game like has a white savior coming in, and, like, fucking just pulling Farah out of these situations, and it's infuriating. The aesthetics of that segment, parody mission, parrot a mission from Call of. The aesthetics of just Middle Eastern soldiers shooting into the air, like.
Only the bad ones.
Only the bad ones. Again, showing that they're the moral goods.
Yes, we've bought time, but Barker will retaliate.
So will we.
I think that's where
Commander Karim's forces have destroyed General Barker's
I'm gonna call it a day.
Temporarily limiting Russian air capability.
I can't skip that cutscene.
Sergeant Garrick, thanks to your intel, we tracked the
I mean, I'll continue tomorrow with some more. Oh my god. This mission is a whole can of beans. I'm gonna finish that that thought I had though previously in regards to the aesthetics. That being in a helicopter, looking through a computer screen, and shooting people on the ground with missiles and guns, directly parrots mission Death from Above in Call of Duty 4. That very realistically, even for the time, portrayed drone warfare using an airplane to demolish forces on the ground. It was kind of controversial because of how realistic it was, and on top of that, it was criticized because years later a video leaked of an actual AC-130, the same plane used in that mission, killing people in the Middle East, and they looked one-to-one. It looked almost exactly the same. So the fact that they use those aesthetics for what is fundamentally like some of the most controversial visuals in war, drone warfare, or like bombing people in the Middle East, is the fact that they still have those aesthetics is just concerning. Now, obviously, it's for realism because I'm sure actual attack helicopters look through screens like that, but it's a no for me. So, anyways, moving forward, with my one viewer, nice. I'm not sure if that counts me on my laptop. I'm gonna call it for the day. Played for a little over an hour, I think. Yeah, so that was fun. Let's do this again. We will do this again. Moving forward, I think I'm kind of getting a better pace. I realized I went through my notes a little too quickly and I skipped some things. So moving forward, when I look at my notes and discuss points in the mission, I'm going to be talking about this and that and this at a better pace. The next mission is tomorrow we're gonna start with Clean House, which is one of the most probably problematic missions in this game, where you're expected to basically it's a no-knock raid on a house, and you're still playing a cop. Yeah. And I'm gonna look to see if there's any missions we could skip, because I'm realizing some of these missions don't have enough. Proxy War, the mission we just played, didn't have that much content for me to talk about. There were some interesting things, but yeah. So I'm gonna go over the schedule for this again. All right, thank you. I'm gonna stop broadcasting. I don't have an outro. Let me go back. Wash your hands. Wash your hands. Thanks.